So, picking up from June 15th, this indicates that just in the world, right, lies are renowned as false. So, both Jangkya and Röl-pay-dor-je and Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po put a great deal of emphasis on lies and falsity. The false show that emptiness puts on. How interesting. The false show that the aged mama puts on. That the aged mama puts on masks. Instead of separating out cyclic existence and emptiness, talking about it so separately, as is often the case. And then, of course, there are these statements, cyclic existence is nirvana, nirvana is cyclic existence. This poem is certainly written from the point of view of the latter, but explaining how writing from that point of view, within that point of view, a differentiation is made. The mama puts up a lying face, a lying mask. So these births, deaths, and so on are false. And then he brings up mama. Although mama, this emptiness of inherent existence. So it's true. Why? Because there's a coordination between how emptiness exists and how it appears. How, in direct perception, it exists the way it appears. Therefore, it is true. Unlike everything else, the way it exists and the way it appears in direct perception is false. It has an overlay in our appearance, in the way we see it, that is false. As Buddha said in Tibetan, Duje Tamche Lue Churcheno, all compounded things are deceptive, have the attribute of deceptiveness. And he puts the deceptiveness on the side of the object. He doesn't say the way we see it is deceptive. He puts the deceptiveness on the side of the object. Why? Because that's how we see it. You see? It's very, very smart. It's a very smart talker, a very smart speaker. That's how we see it. So he says, it's deceptive. It's deceiving us. These things are deceiving us. It's beautiful. So here, Undeceiving is saying, although mama emptiness is true, it's described so that thus it's undeceiving. Nevertheless, it has deceived me. So this is if this is a quote, so he's saying, Jang-kya Röl-pay-dor-je is saying, it has deceived me through contaminated actions. He's putting the blame on mama, afflictive emotions and so forth, like emanations binding me in cyclic existence. So Buddha puts out emanations that bind us in cyclic existence, like an emanation that makes all sorts of trouble for you. Or what is it? An emanation by a fake magician, or is it an emanation from Buddha? Or whichever way you take it. Since he's putting the blame on mama, why not put the blame on Buddha here? Mm-hmm. Buddha puts out an emanation that gets you into trouble. Because we're so low on the path. Tells you to go out and steal. Like Marpa's teacher, Naropa. The deception this way is for common beings, for jerks, people like us, but not for superiors, those who have realized emptiness directly. What makes them superior? This is the word Aryan, this very uncomfortable word that Hitler used, the Aryan race. Like the Aryan people came down from where? Somewhere in Europe, down into India. And Arya came to be a really marvelous word in India, where the Aryans, where the white people, so to speak. And then Hitler picked it up, and we have the Aryans, in the US and Canada, who say people with white faces are, the best. The total perversion of language. But that Arya came to be superior. So that kind of language was brought into Buddhism also. But Arya, why is someone risen above, but not risen, risen above the rank of a common being? Why? Because of perceiving emptiness directly, and for no other reason. It wasn't because their skin was darker, or because their skin was lighter, or because they were taller or fatter, which of course, if it was Tibet, you'd probably be called an Aryan because you were fatter. If you were extremely obese, extreme to extreme to extreme, you'd probably get to be called a Pakpa Aryan, right? Because that was preferred. Total Slav would be total Aryan. They didn't use that language, but things get words get perverted. But it's super clear in Sanskrit. That's the way it's used. I can't help myself from saying that the term for cessation in popular Indian culture means condom. Why? Because it stops semen from flowing out. So the term cessation, it's just knocked me over because I don't know Hindi, but I could read the slightly different, alphabet, and I'd read Nirod and think, wow, cessation. What did it mean? Okay, I don't need to repeat it. It's the dumbing down of, it's the understood dumbing down of the language. Why not? It would get to be used that way. And, you go to the Nirvana restaurant in California, right? There must be Nirvana candy. This coffee is Nirvana. The total bastardization of language. Just one has to keep the context in mind, as much as it might make one shiver. We're going to come upon something like that later in this text. Also, the deception this overcoming me, since they have directly realized emptiness, they do not newly accumulate actions. So, impelling them into mundane existence, sickly existence. Different word here, as the note lays out. Sickly existence. Hence, in dependence upon relying upon elder brother, which I think I understood correctly by putting the grammar, as I said last time, together a different way, and not just make it dependent arising, but explaining what dependent arising means. Properly enacting, abandoning unwholesome, which is a translation in the context of America. It's, what does it say here? Unwholesome is black. It simply is black. And you can't often use words like black and white in the US because we wouldn't want to say anything bad about black or white. But really, I'm bringing myself around to not using unwholesome and wholesome and just saying black and white. In Taipei, when you're going on the escalator, clearly white skin, at least for women, is preferable. You're going down the escalator to the subway, women with whiter skin. There are all sorts of advertisements for cream to make your face white. Kind of sad. But anyway, in taking up of white actions, a kind of joke I like to play on people who know Buddha Samaja highest yoga tantra is that the black mind of near attainment is the deepest mind next to the mind of clear light. And that the minds of white, red or orange, and black are all pollutants, no matter how fantastic they are. White and red or orange, if you experience them, you would think that either of those are liberation, omniscience, whatever the transcendental life of the spirit. The black near attainment is catatonia and eventually being wiped out, but it is more subtle than the previous, which when you swoon into it and lose consciousness, awareness, then you wake into the fundamentally innate mind of clear light, which is beyond those three pollutants. So if you want to make something out of color, where are you going to find it? Jang-kya hopes that he will be protected. You see, he's assuming a position of modesty. He will be protected from the frights of cyclic existence by relying on the elder brother. This particular meaning of dependent arising being a statement of spiritual experience, see Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po is cluing us in. It appears to be a basis for much analysis. And I've added in brackets, reflection, something for us to reflect on a lot. In other words, everything said previous in the long sentence, we need to reflect on a lot, of keeping away from black, ugly actions and being with wholesome, it's a good word. It's a good translation, white, wholesome. And it's fine to use words that, you don't want to one doesn't want to freak out the audience. But I think some of the audience is beyond that. The significance of speaking of all phenomena as manifestations of emptiness is taken as, okay, for example, with respect to a pot, if I suppose I must have seen it in India, but in Tibet also. Well, I associate with Tibet, but maybe the two have been, a person carrying a whole lot of baked clay pots on the back, and it's flat on the bottom, it's bulbous in its base, flat on the bottom, and it's capable of holding fluid. What's the use of a pot if it's not capable of holding fluid? Not satisfied. How could you be satisfied with name only, terminology only, convention only? He piles on the synonyms. When one analyzes, searching for the object imputed, let's say in the 7 ways, not finding anything, thereby not passing beyond an emptiness of inherent existence. Just staying with that. This mere vacuity, which I always forget, was it the 2nd Panchen Lama or the 4th Panchen Lama, Natalie, that Geshe Wangyal taught all of us? The 2nd or the 4th? 4th. The 4th Panchen Lama's very fine practical layout of how to practice Tsongkhapa's 3 principal aspects of the path. And then there's a published translation by Geshe Wangyal himself, another one by Thurman, and another one by myself, and Geshe Suba. And do the evidence thus of non-establishment, the evidence of the non-establishment from its own side, just that evidence, dawning in the aspect of dependent arising. Just that evidence. Dependent arisings encompassing, he means, for example, bulbous base, functioning to hold water, but that means fluid. It's just the same word for fluid and for water. Chu in Tibetan. Chu, you could translate as water or as fluid. Tea is fluid. Tea is chu, water. It's a more general term. And so on. So what's in the so on? A flat base. If you had a round base, the pot would fall over and empty. And so on, in only conventional terms. For as Chandrakirti said, hence, sort of shocking that Chandrakirti himself said this, huh? Well, why would it be shocking? He's the boss. He's the boss. The one from whom all this flowed. But then there's also Nagarjuna, who said, for whom emptiness is possible, all is possible. Which you can look up in the text we diverted from. It's in the notes. And then look to the longer exposition that is begins with it's right in that section where I quote, for whom emptiness is possible, all is possible. There's the I think that's the concluding or beginning stanza. It's how Nagarjuna comments on emptiness as the meaning of dependent arising. It's, it's got note 57, 56, 57, and 58. You can look up those note numbers, and there's a nice section. If all these were empty, there's an objection. If all these were empty of inherent existence, there would be no arising and no disintegration. Nagarjuna puts that in the mouth of an objection. If everything were empty, there would be no arising and no disintegration. And it would absurdly follow for you, Nagarjuna, that the Four Noble Truths would not exist. And then Nagarjuna eventually turns this back on the opponent. Hence, we're back to Chandrakirti. Hence, though all things are empty, they are intensively, there's a three-syllable, probably three-letter in Tibetan, Raptu-gyogi, right? And in Sanskrit, just an intensifier with the word for produce, intensively produced from emptiness. You see, intensively produced from emptiness, manifestations of emptiness is how it's phrased in the poem. And Tsongkhapa's lamp illuminating the 5 stages, where he's illuminating Nagarjuna's highest Yoga Tantra treatise. When all phenomena, the bases of isolation, there's a practice where you're isolating the mind from ordinary appearance. You're isolating the mind from ordinary appearance through practice of purity of appearance. When you have purity of appearance, then you have purity of conception of, you then see things purely, you apprehend them as pure. When all phenomena, the bases of isolation, are delineated as essences of natural purity, if they appear as pure, so you're making them appear as pure. So then you see them as having a nature of, as having an inner essence of natural purity, primordial, empty of, they're naturally pure. Empty of what? Establishment by way of their own character. Now, everything is naturally empty of purity, naturally mama. But we don't, normally see them that way. But here's the practice in highest yoga tantra of making them into that way. It's said that hearers, lower vehicle practitioners are so really addicted to seeing themselves as dirty, they can't engage in this practice. It's so, how could I see myself as clean? Well, you're not seeing the dirty as clean. You're replacing it with an imagination of the pure. But if you're addicted to seeing yourself as pure, how could you imagine yourself as pure? That very emptiness of inherent existence is ascertained as dawning as those phenomena. You see, that very mama, emptiness of inherent existence, is ascertained as dawning as those phenomena. Mama is seen, this pure mama is seen as dawning as those phenomena, not the masked mama, but seeing mama as herself. The aged mama, the cruddy looking mama, is seen in her true aspect. And that mama appears as phenomena. Thus these phenomena, no matter how beautiful my walls are, that's crud. They're seen in their true aspect as pure. Why am I shouting? But when you get inspired, you talk in a different voice. His Holiness's true voice, inspired voice, is his rage, goat voice. I should say goat voice first, and then say in Tibetan, it's called rage. Goat voice is, he says, rage, goat voice, because his voice goes high in pitch, which he criticizes himself for, but really it's his voice of inspiration. I wonder if I'm sure in his old age, because when he was lecturing in Mungad, his voice was just as good as it was in his youth when he came down from his throne. He came over to me and he said, I don't know. He said something like to me, came over to me and he said, because I was sitting right there with Joshua, and he said to me in Tibetan, my brain is still great. And I said, your tongue is too. I should have said your throat, I guess. But I said, your tongue is too. And he had it sort of startled him. Like, what do you mean by that? But that's common. Uh, travesty, not travesty. Um, Saraswati sits on the tongue throat. It was fabulous to see the strength of his voice and rapidity of his speech and how he went on for quite some time. This is the meaning of phenomena being manifestations of emptiness. Isn't that fabulous? Wow. Wow. So, His Holiness, this was, I don't know, something like 1972 or sometime between 72 and 75, when he was explaining the fact that the teachings on the fundamental innate mind of clear light and the similar terminology in all of the orders of Tibetan Buddhism descends down to this, meets back to the same fundamental thought. As Tsongkhapa says, in Tibetan, the term gongba, which many people translate as intention, but that honorific word gongba, Tsongkhapa says, means thought, in Tibetan, samba. And I see no need to translate gongba as intention. There are instances where, very few, where I think it needs to be translated as intention. Intention makes it mean something like, there's another instance where it's more like what you're actually getting at, but comes down to one thought, the same thought. Not as if it's some other thing, that you have to get at, explain it. No, it's what they're all saying the same thing. You don't have to look at the words of what they're saying and explain it some other way. They're all saying the same thing. That's why his explanation of this, which is in the last chapter of Kindness, Clarity, and Insight, is so marvelous. Many people have said that sort of thing, but he's gone to the trouble. He put a lot of time into digging this out and explaining it in many different contexts. In my case, he sat me down across from his desk in Dharamsala and explained it to me privately, which I recorded. He wanted it recorded, obviously. And then came to the Uma Institute and explained it in a talk in my house in the temple. I hope to become released through the kindness of only aged Mama. And instead of a period, it should be a M dash, a long dash. If these apprehended and apprehenders were like this, were as they appear to us now, there's no way we could get out. There's no way we could become omniscient. No matter how powerful Buddhas are, they couldn't help us. Nobody could help us. We'd be stuck. The mess would be the mess. Even the victors of the 3 times, past, present, and future, no matter how close they came to us and banged us on the head, back, body, front, behind, would not have the means to protect us. And indeed, when persons in other religions meditate, that's the conclusion they come to us. They come to God, the Creator God, has to take us over and liberate us. Only the all-power God. Why? Because they meditate and get to a nice state, which is the way our meditation, we common beings, we experience something really deep, and then we revert, and we get angry or desirous, or we can't help but wanting chocolate milk or chocolate cake or whatever the thing is, or lust after this, or get angry at that, spiteful at this. If we name it, if I keep naming things, I'll hit on something that strikes my heart. I want to get rid of my itching, right? Desperately.
Just at one point,
Please.
in the paragraph before the Nagarjuna's quote. Also, I should press the unmute button. It says there, not finding anything, thereby not passing beyond emptiness. So
it's because you have the object of negation in mind.
Yeah. So when you don't find anything, you're not passing beyond emptiness. Sounds a bit strange to me.
So you're not finding any of the object of negation. So you're actually finding the non-finding. So there's 2 findings here. I'm jumping your answer because I'm not giving you enough time to ask. So you're not finding there's 2 kinds of finding here. You're not finding the object of negation, which is a finding itself, different kind of finding. So you're finding the non-finding, and the finding is the realization of emptiness. The non-finding is searching for and not finding the object of negation. And because this is Jangkya being very practical, and he doesn't want to split hairs and have a finding of the not finding. The non-finding itself, he wants to leave it as that and not make the distinction that you're finding a non-finding. The non-finding is the ascertainment. That means it is an ascertainment of a non-finding. So that mere absence is the mere absence of inherent existence. And that itself is a finding of mama. So that's emptiness. And he's calling it indeed, the forcefulness is a total non-finding. It's an experience of a non-finding. And that's why Dendal Harimba says it's like mounting a wild horse, because it can so easily be an experience of utter nihilism, because it's a total non-finding. And you could draw the conclusion that you're not even finding emptiness. And and so, like when Vic was with us, she is with us somewhere else, and we'll listen to this. She was anxious to even go on and find dependent arising, you see, and didn't want to stick with the non-finding. And what Jangkya Röl-pay-dor-je is wanting us to do is to absorb the non-finding, to stick with that, and be impressed with the non-finding. And even, I would say, face all the troubles of the extreme of non-existence, well, maybe there's nothing. And then, you come out of it and you do some readings and you hear that this is the non-finding of the object of negation, but that's the finding of emptiness, the finding of mama. And you try to work it out. And even that somehow, and how could this be, there is still left over, you see, dependent arising. And as His Holiness said, you veer off, as he was sitting there when he had the armchair, and you veer off to the extreme of nihilism. And then when you're back working with things, you veer back to the extreme of existence, putting too much, that things are most findable, even under analysis. And you're back, you're flipped to veering from one extreme to another. And this is what we're left working with. So Jangkya, like the material where we are working in, it's not easy to not be flipped into the extreme of nihilism. Mm-hmm. And then when we're working with, you got to take care of taking out the garbage or paying your bills. to be flipped into, well, the only way I can work with worldly life is to work within ignorance. And moderating, working back and forth between the extreme of non-existence, the extreme of existence, and trying to mediating these two where the two work together, just like in developing concentration of too much excitement and too much lethargy, too much tightness and too much looseness. And not developing skill in these is why people give up on meditation and give up on developing wisdom and seek for a creator God or it's sort of the same thing, the blessings of some all benevolent or all angry spirit within Buddhism to have control over our lives. But also it being helpful to receive blessings from helpful lamas, but not thinking that's the be all and end all. Because as Keizan Sambo said, make sure to make advancement while you still have enthusiasm. Otherwise, when the enthusiasm dies down, the spirit of, oh wow, I found something good, while it's still there, make sure to make some real advancement, because that'll go away. And I think I've related, there's this real, when I was going into what I call the downtown temple in Lhasa, there was a monk sitting up as I was coming in the big door. There were a couple of monks sitting on a little platform there. And he said the equivalent in Tibetan of, you guys still have fervor. Meaning, I don't got no fervor anymore. I've run out of fervor. And I didn't have anything appropriate to say. I just figured, well, let him dig my fervor.